Thank you to our friends at RefReps for their support of the From A to Zebra podcast. The full library of episodes is now available at refreps.com under the resources page. And now, Season 3, Episode 5, Letter P, Planning. Join host Dana Pappas with special guest Stephen Woods on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. My co-host Neda Costa is in the sky right now, so I'll be holding down the fort. I'll start with a shout out to our friends at RefReps, who are not only doing great work in the officiating and education space, but who are proud partners of this podcast. Today, we're talking about the letter P and the topic of planning, which is a skill that every official needs to be successful, and one that the average sports fan doesn't really know a lot about when it comes to what officials do to get ready to work their games. Our guest today is an umpire in the National Football League who joined the NFL officiating staff in 2017. He has over 2 decades of officiating experience, including time in the Big Ten and Mid-American conferences before joining the NFL staff. When he isn't officiating, he works as a financial advisor, so he spends a lot of time planning for himself and others. We would like to welcome our very special guest, Stephen Woods, to the show. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this. Little side note, Stephen and I actually met at an NFL game in 2021, watching Tony Correnti, of course, now retired, and sitting in the officials section, which is always pretty easy to identify the other people who are sitting there neutral at a game, and hit it off, and just super excited that we've been able to stay connected and really looking forward to our conversation today. So I love how we connected in such an organic way, and thanks to Tony Correnti for that. So
I had an off weekend, so I called my buddies. I took a couple of my kids, I think, to that game. So
it was so cool. And, it was the first time we had gone to an NFL game to specifically, invited by one of the officials. So it was just neat to kind of see all of us talking like, who are you here watching? So
Yeah.
It was a cool experience, and certainly excited to always meet new people, especially those who are officials, because officials are my favorite people in the world. So
mine too.
before we really get into the topic of the day, can you tell us about your own officiating journey? How did you get your start? What were your steps along the way? And how did you get to the NFL?
Well, I played football all the way from 4th grade through college. I played at small D3 school, Wabash. After I graduated from college, I moved to Texas, and I was in a boot camp class on a Saturday morning, and I think we were doing some shuffling or something, and a guy named Jeff Batts said, did you play football? And I said, yes. And he said, did you ever think about officiating? And that one question set me off on an entirely different path. Jeff was a longtime SEC rep, and there was another guy named David Malone in there. And that first year I got all my, uniform and everything, and I carried the down box for a high school crew in Texas. All these guys were also small college officials, and I just wanted to do what they did. Moved back to Indiana in 2000 and got hooked up with other guys who are continue to be my very best friends, and just kind of slowly worked my way up. I started doing Pop Warner. I do 7th and 8th grade games. I subbed in for any high school crew that needed me until I got hooked on with a crew, and I never, ever thought that I would make it to the NFL. I just knew that I wanted to do that next thing. When I was in high school, I was like, if I could work a state championship, that would be super cool. If I could just work in Division III football, that would be amazing. And then I got there, and then, you want more. I was like, I'd seen the guys in the MAC. I was like, I could do that. And if I could just get into the MAC, then I'd be happy. And, you get in the MAC and you work a championship and some bowl games. And it's like, I'm watching the guys in the Big Ten. It's like, I could do that again. And so I got hired into the Big Ten. I think I spent 4 years in the MAC, 5 years in the Big Ten. As I was working my way up into the Big Ten, I got onto at that time, it was the Advanced Development League, or ADP. It's now the Mackey Development Program.
Oh, yeah.
And so I knew I was on the radar, but the difference between being on the radar and getting hired is just complete luck. I had the right people pushing and pulling for me. Bill Carolla, who's continues to be the supervisor of the Big Ten. Had a great relationship with Dean Blandino. Dean hired me. Dean left shortly after hiring me. If Al Riveron, who took over for Dean, was making those hires, I may not have been hired. And I would have been, serving out my 10th or whatever year in the Big Ten at this point. It also had to have the right people on the field retire. We only have 121 officials, so we had to have enough umpires that opened up a slot that then gave me the opportunity. So, I mean, there are 50 other guys and gals maybe that could have gotten this call, and I just happened to be it. So, I think you work yourself up to a position, and you're just at that fulcrum point where you can tip over one way or another. And lucky enough for me, I got tipped over into the NFL.
And that's incredible. The fact that it started with one person asking you one question. And I think that sometimes we underestimate the power of recruiting in that way. Like, have you ever thought about officiating? Because that is the most effective way to this day. We could use social media and billboards and all of those things, but sometimes it takes that one person asking that question. And I love hearing that, but I love hearing about the kind of your journey and the fact that you just kept going, I could do that too, and I could do that too. And there is that element of you were an athlete, so there's some competition as well where you challenge yourself. And I think that that's such a cool story, but I know it's common with officials where they kind of, what else can I do? What next? I'm fine here, but maybe I'm not fine here. So that's
Yeah.
really cool.
I mean, it's kind of a tragic flaw, right? Any good quality taken to extremes can be your downfall. It frustrates my wife because I'm never happy. I worked a wild card game this year, and I was pouty because I wish I worked a divisional game. And if I ever get to work a Super Bowl, I'll be like, I want to work another one. It's just, I think they want to hire those type A people. You've gotta always want it. And the minute that you stop kind of wanting it, I think you need to get out.
I agree. I agree. And that's that passion. And I think that,
Yeah.
our audience, it's a lot of officials, but there are people who are not officials. And I don't know, unless you're around it or you're in it, people don't understand that passion and how it really is such a driver for officials. And you love it. Like, you do it because you
Yeah.
love it. And you're right. When you start feeling like it doesn't matter if I get that game or not, that's probably when you're done, when you just don't, you're apathetic to the games that you get in that way. So I think that that's a great, really great point.
If you don't get goosebumps at the national anthem and still some butterflies, I think that now you probably think you got it all figured out, and that's when things are going to go really bad,
That
when you
is
stop kind of working.
That is so true, and I hear that from officials at every level, and I love it when I hear somebody talking about, obviously I'm in the high school space, when they talk about, "Hey, I'm doing an 8th grade game," and I still get the chills for the national anthem because it's meaningful, it means
Hmm.
something, and you love it, and you wanna do a good job, and it's when you start to kinda, rest on your heels a little bit that then the game goes south and you're like, "Uh-oh, like, what just
Right.
happened?
Yeah.
I've checked out." So you kind of started going in that direction about getting hired into the NFL. So with regard to that experience, what was it like when you got that call that you were being hired into the league?
So it was on April 24th. So we're coming up on my
I was going to say
anniversary.
almost an anniversary.
Yeah. Um, I actually missed a call. I was at work, and I'll look at my cell phone all day, and I look up and I missed a 1-2 phone
Uh-oh.
call. And so I listened to the voicemail. Steve, this is Dean Blandino. Give me a call back. And I was like, so I call him back and I get his voicemail.
Oh,
And then he calls me back a little bit. So now I'm like not letting anyone in my office. I'm not taking any phone calls. I'm just sitting here willing this phone to ring. And it happens. And, he says, Steve, I can't even really remember what he said just because my mind was going 1,000 miles a minute. But he said, we'd like to bring you on to the NFL. He's like, are you there? And I was like, yeah, I'm just trying to take all this in. I can't believe it. He's like, look, do me a favor. Don't really announce this yet. You can tell your family, but just kind of keep it on the down low. My wife was traveling. She's an attorney, and she was in depositions. And so I call her, voicemail. I call her back, voicemail. And then she calls me. She's like, "What's wrong? What's going on? Are the kids okay?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." She's like, "Well, are you okay?" I was like, I just got hired into the NFL. She's like, "That's great. I got to call you back." And I was like, "Well, okay." I took my 3 kids out for dinner that night, and I told them I was all excited, and they're like, "Can we get dessert?" I was like, "Yeah." And we went to a restaurant not far from our house. They're like, "Can we just go home now?" And so they left, and I was sitting there by myself at the celebratory dinner and couldn't tell anybody. So it was kind of an inauspicious start, but obviously, the kids were pretty young at that time. My oldest was only 6,
Oh,
uh,
yeah. They
and she's
just wanted ice
16
cream
now.
at that point.
Yeah, but
You're like, "I
everybody
wanna
was
celebrate
so
this, and I
happy.
have no one to tell."
Yeah, my brother was happy, but then it
That's good.
started getting out. And
You had
and
the one.
the one of the best parts was being able to call all of the people that got me there. I called my high school crew. I called Jeff Batts and Dave Malone and all those guys from Texas. I called Tom Ransom, who hired me and gave me my start in Division III. I called Carl Paganelli Sr., who hired me into the MAC. Carollo already knew, but just being able to call these people and thank them, because we are nothing but kind of products of all the people that help us. And if you ever for a minute think that you got there on your own, uh, you're delusional and sorely mistaken. So having the opportunity to call those people and thank them was really special.
Oh, I love that, and that's such a huge part of officiating is being able to tell those people who helped you, because there are some people who do really feel like they got there on their own, and like you said, they are completely wrong when they feel that way, but I would say 99% of the officials who make it to the if it's college or whatever their pinnacle is, they know, and that's one of the things that is so rewarding to them is to be able to call those mentors and call the people that, all the shoulders we stood on to get to where we are, and that's just such a great moment, and it means so much to those people that have helped you because that they've poured into people and now that carries on, through the next generation of officials. And they love getting those calls. It's, in my position, it's still my favorite thing when one of my officials from New Mexico will call and be like, "Hey, Dana, I got into college basketball or whatever." And it just makes my heart feel so good because
Yeah,
they think enough of you to make that phone call. Like, it's so important when you hear from somebody that you've mentored or worked with or whatever. And, now you're in a position where you've probably got people you've mentored who can make those calls to you. And now you've been on the other side of it. And that's always a
yeah.
cool experience. So as we mentioned in your intro, your off the field job is that of a financial advisor. What are some of the parallels you see between financial advisement and officiating?
Uh, Time management, and I'll go through these pretty quickly, and then we can drill down. But time management, organization, and preparation. Probably the biggest adjustment from moving from the Big Ten to the NFL was time commitment and balancing, your family with your job with football is very difficult because there's only so many hours in the day. And my job is such that I can't do really any football stuff during the day except during lunch. And I bring my lunch to work. I'm doing questions. I did some questions today from a test, and then I've got to do it at home. So that is taking time away from my family. And what I found was that regardless of where I was, I always felt guilty for the other two pieces of my life that I was putting on the back burner, whether I was at work and ignoring my family and football, or if I'm home, I'm always thinking about work, things I have to do, and I should be studying for football or watching film, or when I'm traveling on the weekends and away from my family, I'm missing them and um, really trying to be cognizant of the quality of time that I try to spend and, make sure my wife and I go out on a date, spending time with the kids because I don't have that quantity. So I've got to make it up in the quality. So time management's probably the biggest challenge. And I heard from someone at a clinic once that these are all balls that you're juggling, right? But family is the only one that's made of glass. So you can't drop that one. Everything else you can drop and it'll bounce. And but family's one of those things that if you if you don't strike that balance and you give too much time to any one other area in your life, you're going to risk losing the others. So that was probably the biggest challenge and something that I still struggle with and am cognizant of all the time. Organization, for my job, I've got to be very organized. I've got 3 partners. We manage about a $750 million book. We've got a lot of clients. We've got to make sure that everybody that we're working with feels like they're our only client. So we've got to deliver just a really great customer experience. Not always things that we can control, say what's going to happen with the market every day, but we've got to make sure that we are communicating that. And, from a football standpoint, that time management is important, but how do you organize the time that you are going to devote to football? And so, over the years, I've developed a pretty predictable pattern Monday through, Sunday of how I can organize my time in such a way that I can get all those things done that I have to. And in that preparation just kind of bleeds into that. You've got to be ready. You've got to have that time. You've got to have space to study where it's going to be quiet and people at lunch are interrupting me and everything. And so you just have to kind of make do and roll with it at some points.
You actually did a great job of setting up the next question. So we're going to jump into that topic of the day, which is planning. So how important is planning for your game as officials in all sports and all levels? And how do you plan out specifically your week leading into a game day in the league?
So for us, I'll just take you, the minute the game is over, we're going back, we're showering. If it's a 1 o'clock game, we're all getting on a flight. We've got to write down all of our penalties and we've got to write down any notes that we have that says, passed on holding in the third quarter at 12:23, no material restriction or whatever. So we write all that down. We get to the airport and we've got to enter all of that into our officiating evaluation system. It's OES. That all has to be done by, I think they want it done by midnight of the game. So even if you have a Sunday night game, you're going back to the hotel before you ever get into bed and you're filling all that stuff out. All right. So that I can usually get done either before I get on my first flight or probably at the layover. We can download the game from the stadium. And so on the flight home, I'm watching the film. And now it's too late to go and enter anything. So it's not like you can game the system,
Right.
but I just take notes on every single play if there's something germane. But I'm just taking my notes. We're just watching the TV version. So I go and I listen to my fouls. Did the TV like my fouls? Oh, that's a good call. Or, oh, it's not. So then that starts your anxiety kind of going. By Monday, we have all the cuts of the game. So we have TV, we have the high 50, we have both end zones, we have the all 29. And so then I'm watching these particular plays that I've already noted from a lot of different camera angles. And I'm going to see if I missed something. Well, why did I miss it? I wasn't looking in the right place. I didn't have the right progression. And so I do that on Mondays and then I send all my notes to Clay Martin, who's my referee, just so he's got all of that for his preparation later in the week. On Tuesday, we get our preliminary grades. So they're going to write back in that OES system, umpire, what did you think about the action by the left tackle? So I've got to go in and say, I didn't feel this rose to the level of the foul based upon, the ball coming out and the restriction happening well afterwards. And then you just kind of hope that they agree with you. So you put your preliminary grades in on Tuesday. On Wednesday, all of the supervisors have a full day of Zoom and they go through every single foul and every single no call. And then they give you your final grades. So that is what it is. I mean, by that time, you gotta get over it because now from Wednesday and Thursday, you've got to start getting ready for your next game. So I'll go and watch film on both of the teams that I've got. I go through and look at all the fouls and just try to familiarize yourself with, the personnel. I work these guys a lot, so I know kind of who the bad actors are. I know who, if the defense has got a stud defensive end, he's going to give that tackle trouble all day. So I kind of watch, that tackles, what's his footwork like? Is he handsy? And uh, we're getting I think Wednesday night we get our quiz. So we're kind of doing our quiz. I'll do that at lunch on Thursday or Friday. Fridays, I try to just keep it for my family. Two of my older kids are in college now, but we try to all go out for dinner Saturday
Awesome.
morning. I'm on a flight, 6 a.m., connecting through Minneapolis, Detroit, or Atlanta to get to wherever I'm going. I usually get in about noon. I'll probably try to get a workout. We have our crew meeting, depending, maybe about 3 o'clock. We do anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. Then we all go to dinner and then back to the hotel room. So by 8 o'clock that night, all of the previous games have been graded. So then I go and I'll just go and look at all the referee and umpire calls for holding and roughing the passer or hands to the face. Any of those positions that have fouls, I'll go and look at, because that gives me some extra reps to kind of visualize what that foul looks like. We only, basketball, those guys are spoiled because they work so many games.
Right.
They could screw something up on Monday and then Wednesday they get to do it all over again. I got to wait 7 days.
Right.
So one way that you can kind of cheat that system is by film study. And if you can see those fouls and become more familiar with how they start to present and how they end, maybe you're going to get it right more than not. Sunday morning comes in. I'm usually up. We have a little coffee clutch that guys get together. Then we'll have our devotional. Then we'll go and eat breakfast. And by 9:15 or something, we're on a bus to go to the stadium. We get there 3 hours before. Once we get there, there's meetings with production, medical, security. People are meeting with the chain crew. They're meeting with the clock operators. We do the walk around with the field. And, eventually the national anthem goes. And then you get the goosebumps. And then we're on. And all that work that we've done is for those 3 hours. And people make a mistake. And a guy in my office just the other day was saying, well, you get paid an awful lot for 3 hours. And I said, that would be true if I only
If
worked
you're
for
only
three
working
hours.
through.
But what you're not seeing is me putting this work in, starting in March
Right.
for my September games. Like, there are a lot of hours. And while we do get paid well on a per hour basis, it's not as glamorous as it seems.
I think that, part of why we do this podcast is really for an educational component about people who don't understand that. They don't know how much work goes into a 3-hour game.
Yeah.
If it were just a 3-hour game, that would be easy. But the fact that you are, in fact, doing the 3-hour game, but you've worked an entire week leading up to it through film study and quizzes and all of the different things that you're doing, plus working a day job and balancing family and doing all of those things. So I think that, you know, the issue is I feel like officials make it look so easy that people think that it actually is. And it's just they don't understand the behind the scenes of what you all are doing and the fact that when your game is over, it's not like you can disconnect. You're already looking at film and going through fouls and doing all of that the stuff. People don't know that. They have absolutely no idea the hours and the rigors of being a professional official. And even to a lesser degree, they don't understand that at the high school level. They don't know that people
Yeah.
are taking tests and going to classes and going to clinics and doing things to perfect their craft. And I think that that's one of the biggest disservices to officials is that people don't understand how much time you're spending to prepare for 2 or 3 hours for depending on whatever sport you're doing. So love that you
And
just shared that so in depth. That's awesome.
yeah. And Dana, I even add that, you walk off that field and I am, sick about things that I did or didn't do. And I take that and, my family knows that if I had a bad game, I'm going to be pouty for a while until I can go back and get back after it. So when we blow a call, and we all do, I think the fans don't understand that we're taking that with us.
Yes.
And that is just like a tiny little cut and it hurts. And we don't want that. We've never worked a perfect game, and I never
No one ever
will,
will.
but I want that. And I get upset with myself when I don't do what I know I can do. And that's when I get pouty. And that just kind of fuels you to try to work harder to try to get this stuff right.
And that's such a huge part of officiating is no matter how much people are booing the officials or what they say about them on social media, they've already critiqued themselves to death. Like, they don't need your help. Like, officials are their own worst critics,
Yeah.
and they want to have a good game and they want to be the best that they can be. And it's like, I think that people don't understand that element that you do want to be, officials want to be good at it. And if you're going to beat them up on social media, they've already been beating themselves up. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
it's a tough gig in that way because people are not forgiving when everybody else in a game's allowed to make mistakes, but the officials are supposed to be perfect. It's a very strange part of sports, but we love it and we know that.
Yeah. That the expectation is that we start off perfect and improve as the game goes on.
Totally realistic. Gosh. So, my world is of course high school sports. So can you provide some advice to officials in the high school space about the importance of planning and preparation for their games? And what are some of the must-dos for officials prior to games?
Yeah. So whenever I go and talk to groups at clinics or whatever, I always talk about, you got to control what you can. And there's so little that we can actually control during the game, but we can control our rules knowledge, right? You got to be the person on the crew that the referee is going to look to. And that's something that I am not that person, but I aspire to be that. I want to be that person that's going to come in and kind of save the day. Our appearance, like, we get judged before we ever put air in the whistle, and if we don't look the part, fans are going to say, well, that guy's not even in shape, how's he going to do this? But being physically fit is very, very important. The NFL is not hiring bigger people. I got moved up because I was still kind of athletic looking. And I'm 54 right now. I try to work out 3 times a week, try to keep my weight down. So I can't get faulted for that. And the other thing is our mechanics, or kind of how we progress through plays. Those are things that we can absolutely control. Where am I looking? Where am I standing? Can I do that better? So when I go and look at a foul that I missed, that's one thing that I'm concentrating on. What could I have done differently? Should I have moved a couple steps? Should I not have moved and just stayed stationary to see that better? So those three things are kind of all we can control.
Right.
And then you've got, interceptions and fumbles and unnecessary roughness calls, all that stuff that we have no idea is going to happen. Hopefully, if we've trained ourselves and visualized those fouls before, maybe we can recognize them easier and make the right decision at the right time, and not a play later and say, oh, God, I wish I would have done this.
Right.
So those
And
are the kind of must do's. And that is the same at any level. It just kind of depends on how much time and energy that you're going to devote to working those three aspects, I think.
and those controllables those are so important. And at the high school, when I was in a state association, I would get that a lot about, what can I do? And I'm like, well, you need to take care of the things that you can control. You can
Yeah.
control if your uniform fits you or not. Like, there are certain things that you can do because even as far as advancing, there's a lot of things that are out of your control. You might not be at the camp or at the basketball camp where the person who's doing the hiring saw you. Like, there's so many elements out there that you can do nothing about, but you can absolutely control. Are you in your rule book? Are you solid on your mechanics? Do you look the part? Those are the things that you can take care of. You can't take care of if there's going to be a fan who's going to go crazy, or the high school space, or a coach who's going to go crazy on you. Like those are the things that you have absolutely no control over. But if you do planning and preparation, and you know how to deal with those things, you're going to be in pretty good shape. But if you're not ready for that, you're going to get you're going to get caught for sure.
100%.
And that does transcend levels for sure. So specific to football, football is obviously one of the strongest crew sports in officiating. And you talked a little bit about kind of your individual preparation and some of the meetings that you all have as crews. How do crews plan and prepare together for game day, or is there anything? And then how is it different in different levels of sport where you might have a different crew each week? So in high school, you might not be with your same four or six or however many other officials. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, it's being a good leader and having a good leader that you work for can make or break the crew. You can tell if the referees are putting the time in to prepare everybody. I had said that I take all my notes and I give them to Clay. Well, he's already doing that. And he is going and pulling plays from all over the league that'll help us learn things that we may screw up one week. Other referees in the league are using our play as an example, right? So Clay is compiling all of these plays, and they're really good discussion points. How are we going to work to avoid this type of pitfall? What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen to us? And that is like a whole nother job. People always ask me, like, do you want to be a referee? I was like, no way. Like, I've got enough jobs.
Not interested.
Yeah, and I'm our backup referee. So last year in Detroit, I worked the second half. And so I've got the mic on, and really good referees make it look easy. And until you're standing there with everybody looking at you, just trying to make a simple announcement, you know, holding, offense, number 7. It looks so easy. And I messed up. I think we had a unnecessary or an unsportsmanlike. And I said, I started to do the personal foul, and then I was like unsportsmanlike. And then I got all flustered and I was like, on Texas. And the announcer's like, he just called a foul on the whole state of Texas. And it was against Houston. And um, but those guys, so they've got to prepare for an even different level. They've got
Right.
to have their announcements right, and they've got to be able to synthesize all these different things that are happening and put it all together in real time to make an announcement with multiple fouls or multiple player numbers or things like that. A really good crew can make a referee look great, but a great referee can't overcome all the shortcomings of a crew. So that's why it's really important that everybody is kind of pulling their weight and doing their preparation to provide a better product, right? When you've got different crew chiefs each week, it's just a lot more difficult. So then you've got to just, again, control what you can. I can't control how these other guys are preparing, and maybe I'm taking it more seriously than they are, but that's kind of what you get. Hopefully, if you've got intentions of moving up, that's going to get noticed, but you got to, again, just kind of control what you can and be ready to step up and help when that opportunity presents.
That's great advice. And the being on the mic, it's so true because NFL officials make that look so easy. And they've
Yeah.
got how many millions of viewers watching them in addition to the people that are in the stadium. And they do make it look easy. And it's like, if you're not doing that week in and week out, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
was
as
like,
easy as it looks.
nobody call something that you don't know the signal. I don't want some crazy signal that's going to make me look like an idiot in front of all these
Is
people.
that even in our manual? Where is that?
Yeah.
Where is that? I want holding. I want
Yeah.
offside. I want
Give you some
false start.
false starts. Yeah.
Those three, that's all I want.
Yeah.
Pass interference, that's fine. So we know that sometimes our best laid plans don't always work out, so it's necessary that officials are mentally agile. How do officials pivot when their planning fails in some way?
So there is a sports psychologist that now works for the Green Bay Packers named Chris Carr. and he's a Wabash College graduate. So he graduated with my brother. And back when he worked in Indianapolis, he consulted with the Pacers and the U.S. ski team and some other, I think some Major League Baseball. And I took him to lunch, and I was like, Chris, help me reset my mind, because I am the type of person that will sit there and dwell on my mistakes. And with football, you got to keep going, especially, as an umpire, I'm always kind of on the move. If I work deep and I wasn't doing anything for 3 or 4 plays, I think that would just sit there and fester in my mind. So before every play, I try to reset my mind, and I say, all right, be slow, or be still, be slow, feel the flow.
Ooh,
And
I
that's
like that.
kind of my reset. Be still, be slow, feel the flow. And that kind of helps me calm down. And I can do that in the time between, getting my count and the snap. And there's some plays where I don't do it. It's because I'm kind of in that flow state. But if I find that I'm outside of it, I try to reset my mind, and it doesn't matter what I did or what I'm going to do. All that matters is now. And you've got to kind of reset yourself. And I use that little kind of mantra to
Yeah.
do that.
I love that. And I think we've talked on a number of episodes about like that self-talk and how important that is with officials for staying engaged in a game. And, especially some of the games where maybe it's a little bit lopsided and you've got to find those ways to stay motivated. And that mantra is so helpful. I love that.
And
So,
I'll add one other thing that I do before we go down and get on the bus. I will, and this may be a little new agey for some people, but I meditate for 10 minutes, okay?
love it.
And I go through some relaxation stages, and then I just visualize the game. I visualize where I'm standing at the coin toss. I pretend like, the visiting team won the toss, deferred. Now the home team's got it. So now I'm picturing the Cowboys starting off on, the 35-yard line. And I go through false starts. I go through holding. I go through hands to the face. I go through chop blocks. I go through roughing the passer. I go through blocks in the back. I go through low. I go through all of these plays in my head that I've also been watching all week.
Right.
And I try to get that back in my mind and get some extra reps, so I'm not having to think about it. And it's not a foolproof thing, but by kind of relaxing, which is the opposite of what the players are doing. I mean, the players are all coming out to hype music, right?
Right.
Like they want to go. We've got to be calm. And I think for me, at least, those relaxation techniques and the mantra that I repeat to myself helps me stay a little bit more grounded and my feet kind of planted on the turf.
That's really, and I guess been around officiating my entire career and never really thought about that. The players are, like you said, they're coming out to heavy metal or rap or whatever, and they're getting hyped up while officials are trying to find their zen a little bit and, be mentally prepared. So it's kind of a strange dichotomy when when you think about it, but that's awesome. I love that. New agey or not, I thought it was awesome. So,
Well, and I know that Chris, because I'll see him when I do Green Bay games, he talks about how he'll have the players do that same visualization, and he'll ask, because they'll kind of scoff at that. Like, well, how
sure.
much time do you spend in the weight room? And they'll brag about it. And it's like, well, how many physical mistakes are you making during the game? And they're like, not that many physical ones. It's like I may run the wrong route, or I may do what. Those are all mental mistakes.
Right.
So we need to train ourselves from a mental standpoint, arguably more than you need to from a physical standpoint, because all those guys are incredibly fit.
Oh my gosh,
And the
yes.
difference between a Division I player and a pro player physically are maybe a couple percentage points. It's that mental that gets them over that hump, and even into the NFL. But then how do you differentiate yourself from the rank and file NFL players to, one of the greats? And I think it's that kind of mental preparation.
That mental edge, that's so true. That's fascinating. Just the whole study of kind like the sports psychology side of it is very interesting, and applying that to officiating is a whole other gamut of conversation for sure. So we have a final question for you, and it's one that we ask all of our guests. The From A to Zebra podcast has a mission each week to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. What can you tell our audience about officiating that accomplishes this mission?
Oh, the education that I've received throughout my officiating has been invaluable, from the all the things that I've screwed up, right? And the very best officials are not born that way. They have they have lasted long enough to learn from their mistakes. We are all just a summation of our errors, right? So if we're not learning from that, then we're giving ourselves a big disservice. So that education piece is something that you never cross that finish line. You've always got to be educated. There's always something to learn. There's always something to improve. So if you're turning your back on the education and you think you've got that figured out, well, you're wrong. The elevate piece is, I think, just trying to put yourself in a position where you're going to work a better game than you did last week. That kind of, again, dovetails into that education, but you got to continually elevate your game or you're going to be stagnant. And if you're stagnant, you're going to get fired, or you're not going to move up, or you're not going to get that high school championship. They don't reward that. They reward someone that's elevating their career and their abilities and all of that. The excitement is being a 50 plus year old person that gets to go down and participate in a sporting event. Physically, there's no way that I could do that. But being able to still get that excitement of running out into a stadium, knowing that they're not there to cheer for me, but that excitement drives you back. And it gets you, goosebumped up before the game. But then you got to kind of let that excitement go, and you've got to get back down. You can't have that spike. You've got to be a lot more calm. You've got to be the adult on the field, which is kind of how I think about it.
That's awesome. And I just, you said something about people aren't there to watch you. Well, I'm always there just to watch the officials. So I'm that one weird fan that you have. So just so you know, if I'm at your game, I'm cheering for you. But Stephen Woods, thank you so much for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. This was a great conversation, and I appreciate your time. It's always cool when I get to see on TV. I'm like, I know that guy. So always exciting for me as a fan, but really appreciate you spending the time to educate our audience and to be on the podcast with us. Love the conversation. I look forward to seeing you again in the very near future. So thank you for doing this. And
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So much fun. I wish Nate could have been on. He would have loved this conversation, but he'll have to watch it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for information about the show. Find our full library of podcasts from all seasons on the resources page of refreps.com. See you next time. When I fall without fail,
when I land. Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra. Facebook, From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.